Okay, so we're about to record a podcast, and we don't
Mhm.
really have a topic, right?
I don't know why we're disclosing that, but yes.
Well,
Please
so
give us your time. Trust us. Make this podcast a priority. We don't have any plan whatsoever.
no, I actually think that's fun because I'm going to pull up a topic that
Okay.
I think you would be able to do off the top of your head, and I would like to disclose it this way. Do you remember me telling you, like, hey, I got a topic. You're going to be simultaneously proud of me and angry at me for pulling up this topic. Do you remember that?
Oh, I do remember you saying that.
Yeah.
And I'm nervous. So, all right, just hit me, I guess.
I secretly consumed Persian Fire by Tom Holland, and I'm ready to talk
What?
about the Persian invasion of Greece.
You did? I'm not mad. Why would I be mad at you?
Because
That's the best thing ever.
because
That would be like if I went and was like, I learned how the rockets work. Let's figure out how to put a man on the moon. Okay, it's not quite that grand a scale, but it's still cool.
yeah, I'm ready to go, and I just didn't give you any warning. So that means anything we talk about today is going to have to come right out of your head. You have no chance to prepare.
Oh, no. Okay.
You see? You see? You see what I did?
Well, just remember that I am at least a nice person.
All right. I learned about Persia in a way that I never thought I would think to learn about Persia. It's incredible.
So you just went and devoured that whole book, the audiobook, I assume?
Yeah, 12 and a half hours. Yep.
Did you love it?
Very interesting. There were a lot of names. The Greek names were harder for me to embrace. It's like the first part of the book talks about, well, I guess we just need to frame this for the third chair because we don't want you to feel like you have to go listen to this book. But it's cool. I enjoyed it. I think we can have this conversation in a way that's informative and helps other people learn about Persia and Greece, specifically in the 490s to 480 BC time frame, right?
This is going to be delightful. You're going to do history, but I would like to ask for one ground rule before we do it.
Okay.
And that is that I would like for you to literally jump in whenever you want, right over the top of me if you want to, when you remember something from the book, even if I'm explaining it, because I want to know what stood out to you and what popped. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so you're giving me permission to be an idiot.
No, not that at all. It's just that the history is a present that you only get to unwrap once, and then after you've unwrapped it, the only way you can experience that joy again is to watch somebody you care about unwrap it for themselves, and you're doing that right now with Persia. So I just want you to interrupt me, and I want you to jump in when you got something, and we'll compare notes on it. It'll be fun.
Okay, I'll do it. I mean, I genuinely enjoyed this, so that'll be easy to do. Just give me some grace. Yeah, I'll do what I can do.
Cool. My pleasure. Okay, so I'm going to ask you to set the table here. Opening question. How did we end up with a Greece? How did we end up with a Persia? And how did we end up with them feeling like they needed to fight against each other?
Oh, that's hard. Well, it's interesting because Persia. Okay, so I'm thinking about a map. So if you're looking at Europe, the bottom right-hand side of Europe, you've got Greece, and it's
Yes.
like just to the left of Turkey, and you've got this really, and that's kind of like the transition between Europe and Asia. And you and I have discussed many times that the Bosphorus and the Hellespont and all that area in there, like you re-roll the dice or, just rerun the Earth simulation, there's always going to be war in that area, right?
I think so.
Why do you think so?
Because it's the intersection of three continents. I think Jerusalem is always going to be contested. The Holy Land is always going to be hot. If you put a heat map of human activity around the planet, it doesn't even matter where you start life on the planet. That intersection is the intersection of the most connected land in the whole world. I mean, think about what else you got. You get the Western Hemisphere, so you got Panama. Well, sure enough, that's a strategic point. We figured that out. It's going to be a strategic point every time, but it's just not as much land. It's not as much stuff being funneled through this area as Asia, Africa, and Europe. Everybody's going to end up there. It's going to be hot, and that heat map is going to radiate out from basically Jerusalem, Syria, Lebanon, Palestine, Israel. That's going to be the hottest spot on the map because that's where everybody has to go in order to get where they're going to pursue riches and relationships with other cultures. And as you go out with concentric circles from the center of the Holy Land, you get still pretty hot, like, bright orange kind of activity. And I think Greece is in that part of the concentric circle. Lots of activity.
Yeah, and these two cultures were completely opposed in how they think about the world. You had Western thought and you had Eastern thought. Like the Greeks, they believed in freedom, and they were trying out this new thing called democracy, and this whole concept of we can lead ourselves was very, very interesting. The one thing I took for this entire book is we are repeating Greek history right now because, well, I mean, this is what just kept coming to the surface to me because the Greeks were awesome and powerful. And you've got the Spartans who are down there in, is it called Laconia? Is that how you say that?
Very good.
Yeah. And so
laconic wit or a laconic statement is that pithy little Spartan comeback. Like, if the king of Persia, the king of kings, the king of the Medes and the Persians and all the different titles and everything, breaker of chains, comes to your people, and if he does this, you will suffer this. And you remember the reply of the Spartans, according to Herodotus, right?
if. Yeah.
It's so good.
Yeah, so good. Yeah. Or if, like, lay down your weapons and they were like, Molon Labe, come and take them. So interesting. So you've got these Greeks that are amazing, and they're incredible warriors. And I remember in a previous episode, you were explaining to me how bad Sparta would have been to live in. And you're right, man.
Mm-hmm.
It's all about, hey, you are a warrior from day one of your birth. I mean, what does your, I don't know, man, the Spartans, just explain them to me, because I just read the book. I just consumed it. But for the third chair, just tell what it would have been like to be a Spartan.
I will. And just real quick again, thank you for reading the book, dude.
Yeah.
That was so cool. What a fun surprise. I had no idea this was coming. I still don't understand the part where you're like, telling me I'm going to be mad at you or something. It's great. How delightful.
Well, I thought you would be upset because I wanted to talk about it and you weren't ready to talk about it. Like, I didn't know if you wanted to brush up on stuff. So
history is so big. I'll never be ready to talk about it.
Okay.
I could brush up on everything and study really hard. And you're talking about most of the known world is in play in this gigantic epic war. And really, this whole gigantic mess started 150 years earlier. There's just too much to know. I can get the broad strokes. So, you could have given me a year to prepare and I wouldn't have felt ready. So it's cool. We'll just take what we get. But you asked about Sparta. Well, what a brutal place to grow up. I mean, it's cog in the wheel, I guess, is the way to think of it. So it's interesting to me that people associate democracy and freedom with the Greeks in this conflict between the Greeks and the Persians. And they imagine that Sparta was this ambassador of freedom and democracy, and kind of they weren't. I don't think many people who live in Western democracies today would feel very at home in ancient Sparta.
no.
I think it would feel horrible. Now, I'm going to get my sources confused because I've consumed a lot of material about Persia over the last couple of years, and then stuffing college, grad school, all of that. So I don't remember what comes from Tom Holland exactly. Did he talk about the Spartan broth, the gruel that they ate?
Yeah, a little bit. He talked about that, fast forwarding all the way to the end after the final battle, where they went and they took over the tent of the king, and they had the servants of Persia make them a meal, and then they compared it to the food that they had. And they were like, "What the heck? Why is he invading us? He's got all this. Why is he even why?" And so they were just laughing at how bad their food was compared to the Persians. And I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah,
What were you going
this
to tell me about
black-
the gruel?
I think the gruel is very emblematic of Sparta in general. If you want to understand Sparta, look at their food. They ate this disgusting black broth that they had figured out over the years is the kind of thing that would give you the right energy for battle and the right disposition. And it was sort of a rejection of pleasure to eat that food. We eat to live and fight. We don't live and fight to eat, right? I mean, those are very different sets of motivations. And Sparta was rough, and they were a weird outlier in the rest of Greece. It looks so little on a map when you look at it now with the whole world in view, but it's very different. It's a lot like the Black Hills of South Dakota, where everything's really gulchy, and you can just travel a couple of miles, and things are very, very different because of how tight the valleys are and how abrupt the mountains are. And you've got all of these different currents and climates with 3 seas contacting the Peloponnesian Peninsula and the Attican Peninsula, the 2 peninsulas there of southern Greece. And so you've got all these different weather patterns, and you got different seas, and you got different climate, and people really lived very differently, even though by car on an interstate, they only live 15 minutes apart by today's travel times. And so Athens was a very different animal than Sparta. They were not an empire. They were not one thing. They were a whole bunch of city-states with their own style and their own sensibilities about love and sex and marriage and war and politics and art and poetry and heroism. And they came together and found ways to be cooperative under this larger threat of Persia coming to town.
When they needed to be. Like, they hated each other,
Yes.
but they absolutely hated each other. But when it came right down to it, they're like, okay, Spartans, you guys are really good at land warfare. And, I mean, prior to the Persians invading, they weren't good at, nobody was good at naval battles, but was it Themistocles that said, hey, we need ships? And
yeah.
so they made them. And everybody's like, why are we making these ships again? What? And then it turned out to be a huge deal. And so they kind of got this, and he was up in Athens, right? And
he was.
So they got all this figured out, and they're like, all right, you guys are good at land warfare. We're going to do the Navy thing, and we're going to figure out how to do all this. And then when it comes right down to it, we're going to band together long enough to whip these Persian dudes. And that's what they did. And that's a primer, I would say, on the Greek side, right?
Yeah, that's great, man. Yeah. So what about the Persian side? Where did they come from? Who are they?
The Persians are interesting. So one of the first great leaders to unify everyone was Cyrus. And
very good.
He unified everybody, and he unified a lot of people, and everybody was like, whoa, this is the great king, and this is the person that's going to make it all go down. And then when he died, everybody's like, what's up? What's happening now? And then they had this dude for a short period of time, Cambyses, is that his name?
Cambyses II, the oldest son of Cyrus, yeah.
Yeah, and so there was Cambyses, and they're like, all right, so he's going to be the king. But there was this group of conspirators that were like, he's not going to be the king. And so they got together. How many were there? 7 conspirators?
Yeah.
These 7 conspirators got together and like, all right, we're going to go kill this dude. We're going to be the ones. And so they just...
Well, you're lumping 2 things together.
Okay.
Cambyses had a brother named Bardia.
Oh, that's it. And
Bardia and Cambyses, Cyrus could see this could be a difficult succession.
Okay.
So he sent Bardia way east and had him govern Bactria and some other very important eastern provinces. And he sort of positioned the direction of conquest in the army for Cambyses in the early going toward, wait, did I do that backwards? Yeah, toward the west to go out toward Egypt.
Okay.
So Cambyses does a big campaign to Egypt. that Herodotus didn't like. We got to talk about Herodotus. Oh, there's so much. Okay, we'll get back to that in just a second.
Okay.
But the sources that Tom Holland leans on heavily in his book, those ancient sources, they don't look very fondly on Cambyses. They think he was kind of an idiot.
Yeah.
And didn't have the nobility, the noble bearing of his dad. Cambyses, I think it's Herodotus who gives us the story of Cambyses taking an ill-fated, ill-advised trip out into the desert and losing a whole army out there in a sandstorm that treasure hunters still go and look for.
They just got lost.
Yeah, it's got lost, swallowed up by the sands. They're out there somewhere. Good luck. I mean, if that ever gets found, it's going to be the greatest discovery of anything ever. It'd be amazing if that's actually out there and somebody could dig up. I mean, can you imagine? 40,000 Persian troops from the 5 teens BC with all of their metal and all of their stuff preserved out there in the sand. Oh, it's just...
That'd be amazing.
I mean, it would connect us to the ancient world in a way previously unimaginable. At any rate, yeah, so Cambyses, it went pretty ugly, according to the ancient historian Herodotus, in Egypt. He killed some noblemen's sons in front of them to make a show of things, and everybody, even his own people, according to Herodotus, they didn't like what Cambyses was doing. He killed some bull that they worshipped in Egypt, was the rumor, in some crazy mad rage, and so he gained this title, the Mad King Cambyses. And then on the return trip back to Babylon and Susa and Persepolis, there are a lot of capitals of Persia, he somehow cut himself on his lance or his sword, and it went gangrenous, and he just died, just over in a couple days.
Yeah, they were talking about maybe on his horse or something.
And now you've got a succession crisis.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And now his lance bearer and 6 of his buddies know something the rest of the empire doesn't know. The king is dead, and his little brother Bardia is in line to become king. And that's where we pick up with the story you were referencing, which is...
Thank you. That helped a lot. Yeah. So the 7 conspirators, they get together and they're like, all right, let's go kill Bardia. And so they head over there, and they this is the way the story reads to me. They knock on the door, and they're like, yes, can I please speak to Bardia, please? And they're like, yes, come on in. And they open the door, and he walks in. And he's like, "Hey, are you Barty?" He's like, "Yeah." And they're like, "Okay." They just kill him, and then they ride off really quick. And this is an interesting story. So they ride off, and you got the 7 conspirators, and they're riding their horses, and they say, because they're all in Persia, they're all the royalty or all the upper class. They're really good horsemen, and so they're riding over the hill, and they're like, "All right, so we have fled. What we're gonna do is we're going to sit here on this hill, and we're going to look at the sunrise over that mountain. And after the first light beam comes over the mountain, we're going to wait, and whichever horse whinnies first, that's going to be the new king." And everybody's like, "You agree?" They're like, "Yeah, I agree." And then it happens. The sun comes up, and the light beam... This is a funny story, and it's hilarious to me that this is lasted so long. Everybody knows what happens, and so the I guess content warning, ancient history content warning for parents. But apparently Darius, the cheater, stuck his fingers in the vagina of a horse and held it up to his horse at the nose, and his horse smells it and was like,
"Well, what have we here?
Looks like I'm the king, boys." And so Darius is the king, and they're all like, "Yeah, that was a good one, Darius. Okay, yeah, you're the king because of this little horse vagina trick you just did." And that blows my mind.
There are so many other ways for you to say that.
But that's what happened. Right?
Yeah, that's the story. Yeah, that's the story.
But this is a story that's passed down and an entire empire is built upon, correct?
Yes.
Right.
And that is so important to how the entire thing works itself out. That question of how did this happen and is it legitimate?
Yes.
And do you remember the name of the dynasty that newly self-appointed King Darius declared? What was the name of his dynasty?
Oh goodness, you're asking me hard. Alchemenides or something? Is that? Am I?
Dude, that's pretty good. You said a lot of the letters that are in the answer.
What is
It's the Achaemenid dynasty.
Achaemenid. Thank you. Yeah.
And so what Darius is doing there, because he doesn't have a good claim to the throne, he's like maybe 27 when all this went down. I could be making stuff up.
Really?
But he was a young man. He was the lance bearer to Cambyses II, the king, when he got killed by his lance.
Okay, I didn't catch
That's
that.
a little suspicious.
Wow.
Right?
Okay.
The normal assumption that somebody would have when there's like the title of the King of Kings of all lands, of all nations, of earth and water at stake, and a person who's in charge of the king's lance is standing there declaring himself king right after the former king died of a wound from his own lance would be, hey, wait a minute. Did you maybe kill the king and then come up with an elaborate plot to make yourself the king?
Totally not.
So he had to get ahead of the narrative, right?
Totally not. Well,
Oh, dude, and the narrative's nuts.
Well, and the other question is, did they actually kill Bardia? Like, that's a question. People don't know.
Right.
It could have been somebody that looked like Bardia. They didn't know what Bardia looked like. It could have been, or Bardia could have just been like, you know what? I'm going to go be a farmer. I agree. I'll never come around again. I'm going to go be a farmer. Who knows what happened?
Right. And they didn't even mint coins with faces on them at this point.
They didn't.
That was
they didn't have
a Greek
language.
invention in Asia Minor.
They didn't have language at this point. Darius was the one that said, "Hey, we need a language." Am I right about that? Like,
I think that's an overstatement.
okay, thank you.
No. These were a very cosmopolitan, multilingual people. And we know, for example, from the books of Second Chronicles, Ezra, and Nehemiah in the Bible,
Yeah.
there's a lot of court drama in those, courtroom drama, like, will the king make it to the archives before the enemies make it there to destroy the record that will exonerate the people and solve the crisis, or will the bad guy get there first and burn it? And then when the king walks in, be like, I couldn't find that record. I guess it's just gone. In the Persian era Bible business. But we do get indications that these decrees that were held in the old capital of the Medes, Ecbatana, that Darius finds during his reign, and that a decree that Cyrus issued earlier, that these were issued in Aramaic, an early form of the language that was Jesus of Nazareth's daily language. In addition, the language of the Elamites and a bunch of other stuff. So the Persians, they really wanted to be the kings of kings, the kings of the world. And rather than inflicting one language on everybody, they very much operated in multiple languages as a concession. Because before them, you had the Babylonians and you had the Assyrians, and they were both very iron-fisted and tried to control a huge swath of the ancient world as well, just through brute, raw force and fear. And so when the Persians came along, they were like, that was the undoing of both of our predecessors. We should take a more conciliatory approach to governance. And so this factors really heavily in the Hebrew Bible and the Christian Bible when the Jews had been taken captive by Nebuchadnezzar of the Babylonians in 586 BC, about 40 years, 50 years before the Persians showed up. And their temple got destroyed, and Jerusalem got destroyed, and the walls were torn down, and the last remaining Jewish people were taken away, probably to be lost forever to history, just sort of bred into whatever the Babylonians would be, and that you'd never even hear about the Jews. But instead, the Old Testament credits God as supernaturally ordaining that Cyrus would be raised up, and that he wouldn't just defeat and punish the Babylonians, but that Cyrus would also let the Jews return to rebuild Jerusalem and the temple. And indeed, that's all over the Bible. Cyrus the Great surely ranks in the top 100 most mentioned people in the entire Bible. He's a very, very prominent figure in the Bible.
Which is interesting. And that's what this did for me. It made things come alive. It was a good book, man. It was written well. It just made that ancient world real to me. It framed it in terms of current events. Like right now, as we record this, we're kind of in the middle of a large invasion of the Ukraine by Russia. And I see a lot of parallels to how this is going on because the Greeks. So let's. Okay, so you've got. I guess we need to finish out the Persians, right?
Let me do a quick grand reset so you can make that point. We can all be operating from the same.
Well, we got to get from
set of
Darius
facts.
to
Is that okay?
Xerxes real quick. Like, just mention Xerxes.
We'll do that. Yeah, take us there. How do you do it? How do we get from? Why are we in a fight with the Greeks?
Well, okay, so Cyrus basically got everything ready for war, and then Cambyses and Bardia, that thing happened, and then Darius is like, okay, I guess it's time for war because I got this army sitting here, and I can war people, so I'm going to do it.
I'm sorry, I can't let it go, man. No, that's not really what happened.
Okay, tell me.
Cyrus set his sights on Asia Minor, and that's plenty for now.
Okay.
He had designs on working into what historically would be the homeland of the historic Ukrainian people,
Okay.
the Scythians. Now, the Scythians didn't live in the exact borders of modern Ukraine, but Cyrus couldn't handle the Scythians. Nobody could handle the Scythians. The Scythians are not a good people to invade. They're of a weird stock. They don't meet you in battle. They stay on the move, and Persia never got them. So history says maybe not the best idea to try to tackle Ukraine or this people group for long periods of time. The combination of who they are and where they live makes them very difficult to defeat and then keep pinned down, which I think is an interesting historical footnote. But Cyrus then, feeling like he has to put down a couple of rebellions in Lydia, with the westernmost outpost of his empire being in the city near Ephesus, so clear out toward Greece, but still in modern-day Turkey, called Sardis. And that was his big outpost in the far west, and they rebelled a couple times, and Cyrus was mean over those rebellions. But he got it on lockdown, and he built, or rather secured, a highway that ran all the way from Sardis, all the way back across through Babylon and Susa and Pasargadae and Persepolis, and also looped up to Ecbatana. All the big cities of the empire were now connected all the way east to west. It was an amazing achievement of unifying through diplomacy and violent diplomacy. There's no such thing as violent diplomacy, force. And so for Cyrus, he didn't have designs on the Greek mainland. He had culturally Greek holdings in Asia Minor, but he wasn't even looking at Athens or Sparta. I'm not sure he even knew anything about who Athens or Sparta were. Wasn't on his radar. He had his sights set north into modern-day Russia and Ukraine, and his sights set east. And at some point, he wanted to get around to Egypt. But Egypt's a tough foe, historically. When Cambyses took over, it looks like he wanted to take the big, obvious thing that was missing from this global empire. We can't really call ourselves the king of kings if there's an independent pharaoh ruling on the Nile. And so Cambyses went that direction, and that's really all he ever accomplished. I mean, he reigned for a decent chunk of time, but that's what he got done. Still, Athens and Sparta, they're not really on the map very much, other than somewhere during the reign of Cyrus, they started needling just a little bit at some of those Greek-speaking city-states and needled at their loyalty. They meddled, they goofed around and tried to sow discord there between these Greeks in Asia Minor, modern-day Turkey, and their new Persian overlords from way out east. It didn't amount to much for a long time, but after Darius became king, it quickly began to amount to a lot, and it started to feel like another full-blown rebellion from those danged Greeks in Asia Minor way out there at the edge of our territory. And so Darius became agitated and found out that the instigators were these stupid Athenians and some of their allies as well. And that's when we really start to see things escalate.
Well, one of the things the Persians would do is they would say, okay, we have a freaking huge army. And so they would go to these different people groups and they would say, hey, we demand earth and water.
What does that mean?
Give us some earth, give us some of your water. I mean, like symbolically, give us a shovel full of dirt or something and a pitcher of water. to demonstrate that your land is basically under our protection. In that you will pay tribute to the king of kings, in this case, the king of Persia. A lot of people chose the pacifist approach. They would say, cool, whatever. We don't even know who you are. We don't care. Here's a jar of water, whatever. Later.
Mm-hmm. So not even pacifist, but just passive.
Yeah. Then they get to that almost sounds like the who was it that said the British guy that said, he read this agreement from Hitler in the 30s, famously. He says, we have an agreement, and when he reads it in front of people, basically like, oh, we've got an agreement. And then later on, Hitler comes knocking.
You mean Churchill's predecessor, Neville Chamberlain?
Yes. Was it Chamberlain? Yes. Thank you.
I don't know.
Yeah, I think it is. But anyway, it's interesting, and he's just basically saying, just acknowledge that I'm more awesome than you. And they're like, no. The Greeks, well, some of the Greeks didn't really care, and they said, maybe we should just do it. And then the Spartans were like, nah, we're not going to do that. So let's get to Xerxes real quick. So it goes like this. It goes Cyrus, Cambyses, and Bardia. Then it goes Darius, the cheater. And then after Darius dies, it's Xerxes.
Yes. Very, very good.
Yeah.
I bet you can even extend forward past the book you read and guess who Xerxes' successor was just based on his name. Because you've heard of him.
Was it Xerxes II? I don't know.
Xerxes II did exist, but he reigned only very briefly from 425 to 424. But in between Xerxes I and Xerxes II was Artaxerxes.
Artaxerxes.
Super, super, super famous, important king. Yeah.
Got
it. Timeline goes like this. 550-ish, somewhere in there, Cyrus boxes out his rivals, the Medes and others, and begins his conquest of Babylon. Cyrus is king in one way or another from 550-ish to 529. From 529 to 522 is Cambyses and Bardia, with Bardia only being, if he ever even was king, only very, very briefly. Then Darius is an absolute rock star. 522 to 486 is Darius. 486 to 465 is Xerxes. Does that help with timeline?
Did you do that from your head, or did you Google that?
I did not Google that.
That's impressive. Very impressive.
Hey, this episode of No Dumb Questions is brought to you by RAYCON. They make super awesome earbuds that we both use and that we both give as gifts and that I carry around every day in my pocket because there's just always some need for my RAYCONs at all times. And we're grateful that they have been a friend of the program for a very long time. Destin, what do you like about RAYCONs?
I like the fact that the knowledge that I gained in this episode came into my brain via RAYCONs. Not all of it. I mean, there were some times I was listening to the truck and whatnot, but like when I was mowing or using a tractor at one point, I had the RAYCONs in and I was listening to Tom Holland's Persian Fire, and it was awesome. Like there are specific things I can remember doing on the lawnmower. I'm like, oh, I was at this location in the yard when I first learned about whatever. It's interesting because now I have a mental map of the Persian Empire that I gained while I was mowing.
Corresponds to your yard.
Yeah, exactly. It's mapped out.
I've never thought about that, but so much of my Persian knowledge came into my brain via RAYCONs too, because I went on this big kick maybe 6-8 months ago where I would finish up my responsibilities for the day and then I would go fish and I would just queue up books and lectures about Persia, primary sources. And when I picture Persia knowledge, I picture my white RAYCONs and brook trout on one particular trail where I fished and fished and fished and just listened to things about Persia. That's the one where I put my hand on that rattlesnake.
Oh, yeah, that one. That's fun, man. Here's the offer. If you want some RAYCONs...
Wait.
What?
Do you know why I didn't get bit by the rattlesnake, Destin?
Why, Matt?
Do you know why I was aware of the rattlesnake?
Was it awareness mode?
It was awareness mode. Because I had on the awareness mode.
Tell me, fair Matricles, how did you hear the rattlesnake?
Well, since hitherforth I had chosen to be in awareness mode because of the possibility that I
What
might
is
encounter
that?
a rattlesnake, given the harsh environs in which I was fishing, I had awareness mode activated, and sure enough, while I was scaling the front of a cliff to get to a hole that looked particularly inviting,
I heard a little and I was like, dang, I should not go any further. And then I saw a snake and it did not bite me. And then I sent you a picture of that snake.
That's awesome. Yeah, there's sound profiles you can use as well. Well, you can navigate between the sound profiles. You hold the left earbud for 3 seconds, and it'll just toggle between them. You got the pure sound, balanced sound, bass. You can just flip back and forth. And this is the offer. Go to buyraycon.com/NDQ today to get 15% off your Raycon order. That's buyraycon.com/NDQ to score 15% off. Buyraycon.com/NDQ.
They got like 50,000 5-star reviews. They're super affordable. They're high quality. They sound great. And on top of that, they got free domestic shipping and flat fee international shipping as well. If you've already got a pair, think about giving some away as a gift to somebody else who might like them. We, again, really appreciate Raycon as a long-term partner of the program.
Absolutely. And it makes me think, how many people are listening to this podcast right now on Raycons? You know what's happening. Gary.
Knowledge entering the brain, and with awareness mode on, you don't have to worry about snakes. You can go to buyraycon.com/NDQ today to get 15% off your Raycon order. That's buyraycon.com/NDQ to get 15% off. buyraycon.com/NDQ.
Thank you so much for supporting the sponsors. When you do, that supports the podcast, and we are grateful. I guess the next thing that would make sense is you've got the Greeks over here and to your left, and you've got the Persians to your right, and they're going to war, right? And I think we should start with the way it first started, which was the Battle of Marathon.
Well, it's not quite how it first started. Marathon's the famous one, but there's one big battle that I think Holland covers in his version of the story called the Battle of Lade.
Yes,
And
he
the
did.
Battle of Lade is in 594, and it happens near the city of Miletus, which is a disputed city on the west coast of Asia Minor, and Athens has been messing with them, trying to provoke rebellion, and Darius only kind of takes it seriously. Ultimately, it is a narrow victory for Darius, but enough of a costly pain in the butt that Darius is like, remind me to punish those Athenians. We need to do something about that. And that is the incident that really pushes us toward, well, the road to Marathon, which you're talking about now.
I don't completely understand the Battle of Marathon. I do know that the way it went down, the Persians showed up. The original Greeks that made contact were like, "Whoa, what's up?" And they sent a runner. What was the runner's name?
Geogocles? fast runner Cleese? I don't remember his
Nike
name.
Cleese. No, I forget.
I don't remember.
It's like Euripides or something like that. But this guy, he ran and he ran to go get help. And when he showed up at Sparta, right? Am I remembering this correctly?
He would have run to Athens, I would think.
Forgive me. I forget where he ran. So some of the Greeks sent a runner to some of the other Greeks, and when they showed up, they were like having a party, like, and so they were like, "What's going on?" And they had their tents set up as if they were, campaigning, but it was actually just a festival. And they're like, "Hey, there's war happening," and they're like, "What?" And long story short, the Greeks won against an overwhelming force. That was a really, really big deal. And they rested on those laurels for many, many years. And there were some very interesting people that were generals at that battle. Did they call them strategos? What did they call them? Strategoi? What did they call the generals?
That sounds correct right there. The generals on the Persian side were very, very prominent. We know a lot about them. A guy named Datis and a guy named Artaphernes. Artaphernes factors super, super heavily because of his relationship with the royal family. He's just all over these battles and all over this strategy. And they were good. Theoretically, that should have been enough mental power to absolutely whip the Greeks. But the battle it's a mess. Like there was chaos on both sides of the line, according to the ancient historian Herodotus, who we need to talk more about. And you know what? What am I even talking about? I literally have at my desk, because I'm working on Persia stuff all the time. My desk is a mountain of Persia stuff right now. I literally have Herodotus. This is what it sounds like. It's that many pages. Still going. There's still more pages. Keep listening.
And that's in English?
Well, I don't think it was in the first place, but somebody did some work and made it more Englisher. And I have it sitting open. I have it sitting open right now to book 3. That's what I was last reading in Herodotus. Check this out. Here's the page it was open to. You're going to get a kick out of this. Now, Darius had a clever groom whose name was Oabares. To this man, when they had left their assembly, Darius spoke. Oabares, we resolved to do about the kingdom thus, namely that the man whose horse first neighs at sunrise when we are mounted upon our horses, he shall be king. Now, therefore, if you have any cleverness, contrive that we may obtain this prize and not any other man. Oabares replied thus. If my master, it depends in truth upon this whether you be king or no. Have confidence so far as concerns this, and keep a good heart, for none other shall be king before you. Such charms have I at my command. That's how Herodotus tells the story that you were summarizing of how Darius won the horse contest to be king. That's good, right?
That's good, yeah.
Then Darius said, if then you have any such trick, it is time to devise it and not put things off, for our trial is tomorrow. Oibares, therefore, hearing this, did as follows. When night was coming, on he took one of the mares, namely that one which the horse of Darius preferred. And this he led into a suburb of the city and tied her up. Then he brought to her the horse of Darius, and having for some time led them round her, making them go close so as to touch the mare, at least he let the horse mount. Now, at dawn, the 6 came to the place as they had agreed, riding upon their horses. And as they rode through the suburb of the city, when they came near the place where the mare had neighed, just when the horse had done this, there came lightning and thunder from a clear sky, and these things consummated Darius's claim, for they seemed to have come to pass by some design, and the others leapt down from their horses and did obeisance to Darius.
Wow.
And then in the next line, Herodotus tells us about another version, a juicier version of the story that some others knew. So this is important. I'm actually going to read this. I mean, because it's a funny story, but also because it tells you a little bit about how the sources on this stuff works when we go back for this far in time. So Herodotus goes on.
When did Herodotus write this?
Herodotus of Halicarnassus was a contemporary of Xerxes and wrote a little while.
So 480s BC.
He would have been a contemporary of Xerxes and Artaxerxes. So mid 400s,
okay.
I would say.
Okay.
I mean, it's probably on the book.
Got it. Well, yeah, so the campaign was in 480s, so it'd be after that. So the mid. Okay, I'm with you. Keep going. Go for it.
Yeah, okay. So Herodotus, though, at times he traveled all around the world. He went to Egypt. I mean, he's Greek. He knows people in these stories. He gets conflicting stories, and when he does, he just gives you both stories. So he goes on to say, now some say that the contrivance of Oibares was this, but others say as follows, for the Persians tell the story in both ways. Namely, that he touched with his hands the parts of the mare and kept his hand hidden in his trousers. And when at sunrise they were about to let the horses go, this Oibares pulled out his hand and applied it to the nostrils of the horse of Darius, and the horse, perceiving the smell, snorted and neighed, and thus Darius was named king.
Aha!
It's good storytelling, right?
Stinkhand, for I am the king.
Stinkhand, indeed. Not so much my hand, that is gross, but this gentleman here.
What, yeah, we're a people, and we're going to... That is very different than George Washington crossing the Delaware to fight the Hessians. I'm just going to say, those are very different things, Matt.
Is it?
Yes.
We got to talk more about that. We got to talk more about
I mean, the
that.
Hessians
Here's what
were
I'm driving at.
Okay, go ahead.
With this Herodotus
It was
thing.
Christmas,
the reason
too.
I grabbed this book, and dude, we're just not going to need me anymore. It's like you sit around and pound history when we don't hang out together. I understand what this means. The gauntlet is thrown down. I have work to do.
You have to make a rocket now.
I have to make a rocket.
I must make.
Or you will simply be replaced, and I have ideas for how we shall choose your successor, and it involves Stinkhand. So we got this Herodotus guy, right? And He's called the father of history by some, but also some from the ancient world call him the father of lies,
Yeah.
because that's not what happened. There was no stink hand. I mean, these stories, they're in color. They're in full relief. The characters have motivations, and they give these big, stirring speeches. And Herodotus is very interested in symmetry to the stories. So somebody does a bad thing, there's going to be a reversal, and you're going to get that back. Now, that's interesting to me because the Bible in the same era, all of the parts of the Bible that are contemporary with Herodotus are also very interested in symmetry, right down to the details of the Babylonian kings who looted the temple of God in Jerusalem. They're having a banquet one night in the book of Daniel in this era, the last night of Babylon ever, the banquet on the last night of the empire. And they all get drunk, and the regent king's like, bring out all the fancy dishes from the Jews' temple. Let's make a mockery of their God. And then famously, the story goes that a hand appears and there's writing on the wall. That's where we get the phrase, the writing on the wall. And Daniel,
Mene teke parsen. Yeah.
Nice job, man. You've been weighed and found wanting, and this very night, your kingdom will be divided between the Medes and the Persians. And then the next verse is like, and then that happened. You read about that, and then you see that one of the very next things that Cyrus did, according to the Bible, I mean, right away when he became king, he let the Jews go back. And according to the book of Ezra, he took all those dishes that got used to mock the God of the Jews, and he gave them back to him. And Ezra gives a careful, detailed accounting of each and every dish and fork that was given back. Why is he giving the details? Because it's that theme of reversal. These leaders, they get bloated, they get fat, they get drunk, they don't care about
hubris. Yeah.
the truth of it's hubris. And in the Bible, God smacks that down and upholds the humble. In Herodotus, it's a little different set of values. It's a Greekish set of values, but we see that story really played with his audience at that moment in time. People were tired of these mega powers being drunk on their authority and abusing their authority, particularly the Assyrians and then the Babylonians after that. So when you read Herodotus, what you're reading is history, but it is very animated history. And as a result,
not unlike this book by Tom Holland, like he ascribes motives to people.
Yes,
I mean, I think this is the type of writing that teaches me. I read a book recently about the Battle of Gettysburg, and the way it was written, it kind of put me there mentally. And now that I've been there, I understand it more, and I understand where the pieces fit. And I care.
Yeah.
I think that's what's so interesting. Like, I will never have a command of history like you do. It's impressive. You know, I can go to one battlefield and I can mentally place myself on that battlefield and be like, oh yeah, and then this happened, and then, you know, I can be in that one place. But what I don't have, which you do have, is the ability to see where that one piece of the jigsaw puzzle and how that plays into the overall picture. I envy your ability to do that. It's incredible. And so that's why these conversations are so valuable to me, because they help me understand, you know, all I'm doing here is I'm regurgitating some words and names and places that I heard, and I'm trying to piece them together like a child, but you're doing a really good job of helping me know why. And so I just want to say that over the last however many years we've been friends, you've made me care about history because of how interested you are in it. Genuinely. Like, mic's on, mic's off. You genuinely care, and you see how that plays into everything. And it's rubbing off on me, man. I really enjoy it.
And never in my life did I look at every single little physical thing in the world and think about how that works until your interest and mic's on, mic's off passion for that stuff rubbed off on me. So it's really kind of you to suggest that the stuff I'm interested in is in any way positively affected how you think about the world and where we came from. But thank you for saying that.
You're welcome. I had a scary thought in the middle of this book. It came like a shadow. It's like someone walking by and a shadow just kind of like, and you feel it, and then it goes away. And the thought was, you know, if you learned Greek, Destin, you could just read this stuff. And I thought, what was that? What was that? It reminded me, C.S. Lewis was talking at one point in a book, and he said something about, the amount of effort it takes for a man to finally settle down and learn Greek. And I was like, who would learn Greek? Why would you ever do that? And then I felt the shadow. I'm like, what? What was that?
Isn't that interesting?
It's amazing. Okay, so that was a fun rabbit trail. But
It was a fun rabbit trail.
let me draw the lines here. So we've got, all right, so I'm just going to say it again. We got Cyrus, we have Cambyses and Bardia. Darius may or may not have killed both of them, or something happened there for sure. We've got the stink hand.
522 to 486.
We've got the stink hand incidents, and now Darius is king. And then after that, it's unfortunate that people are going to learn it that way, as opposed to the British voice actor whom I learned it from. It was said that Darius, upon the dawn of the light, and I just said, yeah, I apologize to everybody in the third chair that this is the way you've learned this information. I'm so sorry.
I don't.
Okay, and then after Darius, we have Xerxes. And, okay, so that's over there on the Persian side. On the Greek side, we've got all these different city-states doing their things. We have the Battle of Marathon. And the Battle of Marathon, the thing that's amazing is after the battlefield falls silent and the Greeks routed the Persians, on the Greek side, in a much tinier force, you have a total of like 192 men dead. On the Persian side, you got something like 6,000. That is not symmetric in terms of casualties. So the Greeks are serious about the fight. The Persians are not. Like, they're there because they got drugged there by their leader. The Greeks are like, this is home. We're fighting. And so that's when I started seeing the similarities in some of the battles that I'm seeing today. The types of weapons that were used mattered. The Persians tended to have wickered shields.
Very good.
Whereas the Greeks had, the hoplite. You've got these people that are trained in battle. At the Battle of Marathon, they were the Athenians. They were not the Spartans. So did they have hoplites then?
Absolutely. Yeah, that's the basic heavy infantry unit, medium infantry unit, maybe you could call it, of the Greeks. And the Persians were built to whip everything else, but they weren't built to whip that.
That matters so much. I think one thing that's interesting is the way they fought. It's just incredible. The Greeks fought as one, and you were a small component in a larger machine when you fought. And you had to do certain things. The Persians seemed to rely on archers quite a bit, which the shields of the Greeks seemed to neutralize. Anyway, so that's the Battle of Marathon. Nothing happens for, 12, 14 years? I forget the number. It's a long time.
8 to 10, depending on how you date it.
Okay.
Yes. And I'm trying to decide when I'm going to push back on your narrative, and I think I would like to do it now.
Do it.
So here's something I need to disclose. I'm sort of Team Persia.
What?
Yeah.
What?
I had a feeling that wouldn't go over well.
How are you Team Persia? Babylon.
I'm not sure. Go ahead.
They made Babylon out of mud. Like, Babylon is like Sin City. It's Las Vegas of the old world. And it's like, how are you Team Persia?
I'm Team Persia for a few reasons. One, I don't buy Herodotus's account. But I do, but I don't. He's not holding himself out as a modern historian. He's not doing this cold, sterile, safe version of history where he gets into the minutia of these boring little details and restrains from any speculation about motivation. That's how we do history now. He's telling a story, the kind of story that would get people to gather around and listen, the kind of story that gets you paid.
Like the Iliad.
The kind of story that motivates people. Sort of. Yeah, those are different genres, but they're close cousins stylistically. I mean, the Iliad it's poetry, and Herodotus is definitely not organized poetically. It is narrative. But nobody had done this way before him. I don't have any gripes with Herodotus, but you just have to read him for what he is. To wit, he is not the most ludicrous storyteller of his era. There's another guy named Xenophon who takes crazy logical leaps in his storytelling. But Herodotus is trying to make a point, and I've read through the histories, which again has a lot of pages, and this is what you start to recognize. Herodotus respects the common man who isn't soft, who isn't drunk on power, who, you'll hear a lot of historians use this characterization, who isn't wearing silk slippers. And Herodotus's account of Persia is one that demonstrates a lot of respect for Cyrus. He likes Cyrus. He has a problem with the enemies of Cyrus. Herodotus seems to be happy that Cyrus beat the Babylonians. They'd gotten soft. The Babylonians, they worked their butts off back in the 600s to knock off evil Assyria. But they went up the steps in hard working shoes, wood shoes, but then they descended them in silk slippers. And he thinks Cyrus was a working man, a man of the people, a man of character and vision. He has relatively high regard for Darius sometimes. He certainly respects the administrative acumen of Darius and Xerxes. But by the time Xerxes comes around, Herodotus, he thinks the Persians have gone soft. He thinks that Xerxes is a little too effeminate, a little bit too into fancy, frilly things, that he's too obsessed with himself, that his retinue is too expensive when he travels, and he makes sure to point out the most ridiculous excesses of these kings the further along we get into Persian history. Is some of it true? Probably. Is all of it true? No, it looks like it's a characterization to make the story work.
Well, I mean,
And
history is written by the victors, and Herodotus is Greek.
well, that's the funny thing about Herodotus, though. He's from Halicarnassus. You know who else is from Halicarnassus? Artemisia, the woman general, the woman admiral,
Yeah.
who is at all of these big battles and is a trusted advisor
That's Salamis?
of a king. Yes, Salamis. She's a trusted advisor of Xerxes. That's where Herodotus is from. She's of the same stock as Herodotus. So he's really a guy who has his feet in both worlds, and he reads like somebody who wanted the Persia thing to work out. He maybe even kind of liked the initial vision, and he unapologetically views the Greeks as rascals. He's not happy with how his own people handle their business either. Their politics are dirty. They've got some silly sensibilities. They make some stupid moves. But when push came to shove, he liked the style of the Greeks better than he liked the style of the bloated, overly soft, extravagant Persian Empire as it had become in his mind by the time Xerxes comes around. So everything we get from Herodotus is upholding that characterization that I just gave you. But everything I get from non-Greek sources, which isn't as much, because most of what we know about Persia, we know from Greeks. What we get from the non-Greek sources, these Persian kings are looking pretty amazing. And if you just look at what they accomplished, Cyrus, Darius, Xerxes, Artaxerxes, they were phenomenal. There's one more power broker too. I mean, Artaxerxes II, who comes along in the very late 400s and rules for almost 50 years. He was a great administrator. The Persians, they rolled double sixes like 5 times in a row on their kings. That never happens in history. And so I, for one, look at this and I go, these were the first people to disrupt this violent, awful, enslaving cycle that had existed in all the mega empires prior. And I think the Persians are as much as anyone deserving of credit as the foundational people of the West. For all of my upbringing, I was taught that the West are the Greeks and that the East were the Persians. I think it's a battle between Westerners and another kind of Westerners, and the Greek version of Western thought is the one that won out. So I like Persia, and I read this a little bit differently than Tom Holland, but he's smarter than me, and I still loved his book.
Interesting. The main...
Yeah, are we still friends?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, you're the authority. I'm not. But I did enjoy being introduced to the ancient religion of the Persians, Zoroastrianism.
What was that?
How do you say that?
Very good. Yeah, very good. Who's their main god? Do you remember that?
Ahura Mazda.
Nice job, man. Look at you. You're just a sponge.
Yeah, I meant it when I was listening to it. I really wanted to know. And fire was huge in their culture, and as a purifying tool. I mean, there's just a lot to that. So that was really interesting to learn about. I feel like, man, this is a well that's so deep. You've been studying it for months. We may have to break this up because there's too much here.
I'm game.
We've got the Persian leaders. Okay, the Battle of Marathon. There was one person at the Battle of Marathon that I loved, and I thought this person was awesome, and I kind of want to be like this person. Well, let's put it this way. I want this person's reputation, and that was, what was his name? Aristides the Just. I just had to look that up. Aristides the Just.
The Just. Yeah, that's a pretty good name, isn't it?
Yeah, and it was said, like, they gathered up all the loot and the spoil from the battle after Marathon, and they're like, all right, we're going to leave all this. What do we do? I mean, we can't just leave it here. Somebody else steal it. I know. Give it to Aristides, because he's the most honest person in our entire culture. And they're like, what? Oh, wait, yeah, Aristides? Yeah, totally. Yeah, let him watch it. I was like, that is the kind of reputation I want. I want the kind of reputation where people are like, oh, well, if he's saying it, then yeah, of course he's telling the truth. I mean, your name is worth more than gold, and Aristides did it. What's interesting is after the Battle of Marathon, they go back to Athens. Aristides and, what's his name, Themistocles?
Yes.
So these are the two dudes, right? And Themistocles is like the first guy who campaigns like a modern politician in a democracy. He's like, hey, vote for me. You know, he hangs
and
out.
Vote for my idea.
Yeah.
He had a platform. What was his platform? If you vote for me, we will do what?
He wanted a navy, and he wanted a harbor.
Yeah.
He wanted a new harbor.
Yes.
And that was crazy. And at the time, and this is amazing to me, at the time, the type of boat that was fashionable was called a trireme. And basically you had three. Imagine you get in a boat and you're like Ben-Hur style, like you're rowing the oars, right? Well, if you're smart, you can stack in more oars by going vertical with them. So you have 3 rows of oars, and you can row with them. And the Phoenicians were like the bosses at this, but the Persians were really, really good, and the Athenians were like, I don't know, I've seen boats before. I don't really know how they work, but they seem cool and all. And Themistocles was like, yo, dog, we need boats. And the way he sold it to everybody, he's like, let's build a harbor down at this new place, and it'll let us do this, and it'll let us do this, and this, and this. And, oh, by the way, we might make a little naval port. But anyway, the trade is going to be amazing. And so he totally sold everybody on the harbor. Ultimately, he gets his boats. These boats ended up being a huge deal in the upcoming battle.
They were everything.
Everything.
Yeah.
Everything. And so when Xerxes shows up, famously whips the water, what was that about? Tell me about that.
That was about crossing the Hellespont, that little bit of water there as you're coming across from Asia Minor into the Greek mainland there. He built a pontoon boat.
So like opposite the Bosphorus?
Yes, and he... the story goes, who knows if this is true or more of Herodotus characterizing Xerxes as an unstable goofball. I mean, surely Zack Snyder latched on to Herodotus's characterization of Xerxes in 300. What we do see is all these kings are upholding a narrative. Darius is upholding a narrative that he is the guy who defeated the lie. People were trying to steal the kingdom.
The lie,
and
yes.
Ahura Mazda ordained him. There was Darius asserted that somebody was trying to impersonate Bardia, and that the true Bardia was already dead, assassinated, but that this shapeshifter magician had taken over the spot, and he didn't even kill Bardia. He killed a magical imposter of Bardia to keep the kingdom from being stolen.
Ah,
So he actually was doing a favor to everyone.
I see.
And so Darius builds in to the DNA of these kings that they are the upholders of the truth, and they will snuff out the lie that just happens to totally undermine their claim to the throne. And so this idea that nature had chosen them was very important, that Ahura Mazda had chosen them was very important. So maybe Xerxes did have the waves whipped as a punishment for their rebellion against the will of Ahura Mazda, who clearly wanted Xerxes and his army to cross the Hellespont and punish the Greeks, who were also in opposition to Ahura Mazda and the will of the true God and of nature. So maybe it happened. I don't know.
Meanwhile, over in Greece, just a few years before, Aristides and Themistocles, who were generals at Marathon, they were politically opposed to each other, and Themistocles won, got his navy, and Aristides had to leave. Who's the Greek that is advising Xerxes? Who was that? There was a Greek that ended up, it starts with an A.
Dang it, I knew this once. Okay.
I'm looking
Sparta
it up.
at this time is Cleisthenes and obviously Leonidas, but it was a former Spartan. I don't remember
It's
the name.
not Artaphernes, is it?
No, Artaphernes is Persian.
Okay, no, I don't know. So anyway,
No, we'll think of it later.
there's a
yeah.
Greek person with Xerxes telling him what's going on, and so he starts slowly marching over to Greece, basically. The Greeks come up with this plan. They're like, okay, so he could land here, we could do this, or this. And so part of the plan, and this is where it's kind of, they had a council of war, and they're like, all right, what are we going to do? They create an alliance of all these city-states that hate each other. Like, all right, we got to do something. Themistocles, you guys came up with this navy.
Demaratus.
Sorry?
I found it in Herodotus.
Demaratus. Yeah, I remember thinking
the guy who was
the
advising.
name
Yeah.
Demaratus. Yeah, like demerits. Yeah, that's a yes. And so Themistocles has the navy. The Spartans have their kings, and they do some kind of religious thing, and then they say, okay, this virgin lady that's a prophet kind of person. She says, oh well,
Yes.
you got two options. Athens is going to burn or something. Who is this lady again? She's some kind of magic woman.
Oh, dude. I mean, we almost got to do this twice. We really do, because we're not even halfway through this story, and we're not even to the juicy bits.
Why don't we stop?
You're talking about the oracle at Delphi.
Yes.
And the oracle at Delphi, dude, let me just tease it. Sparta wasn't going to war.
Yeah, this will be the place to stop.
So I told you that Xerxes is marching under the banner of Ahura Mazda, who enabled his dad to kill the imposter and preserve the true line of kings, the true ruling family, the Achaemenid dynasty, descended from the grandfather of Cyrus the Great. Xerxes is snuffing out the lie, man. That's what kings of Persia do. And nature and the god of all nature, Ahura Mazda, is on his side as he marches into the Greek mainland to punish these insurgents. Now understand, at this point, I am now on Team Greece when it comes to this. I just really happen to like Persia.
Because there's invasion.
And it would have been, now it's an invasion, and of course I'm rooting for Greece at this point. But I like Cyrus a lot in particular, so I have my affections for Persia as well. But at the same time that Xerxes is doing all of this theater and it's dramatic stuff to communicate to all of his legions that we will win because God has willed it and ordained it, well, so the gods of the Greeks are also in play. And the way you talk to the gods of the Greeks is at Delphi. There's this high mountain. I've been there, and there's this temple complex. There's still a little bit of it there. I've been there too. And there was an oracle there. There were certain prophetesses there. And these prophetesses were probably high on certain fumes that emanated from a couple of caves or like Yellowstone kind of geothermal stuff that happened there. And when they would get into this trance state, they would almost act like the Joker in the old 1960s Batman stuff, where they would, or the Joker, no, it was a Riddler. They would give these clever riddles to bewitch almost the different Greek city-states, because the the Oracle at Delphi, it wasn't on the side of one Greek city-state or another. They all had access to it, and it's almost like they enjoyed playing them off of each other. So it wasn't like, go march into battle against Xerxes, and if you meet him at this bay, you will surely have victory.
No.
Make sure to deploy your archers to the right. I mean, it wasn't like that.
It was a riddle.
Crazy riddles. Yeah.
And
they couldn't agree on how to read it. They didn't know how to interpret the riddle. And so the Spartan army just ground to a halt.
one of the things they said was you may have to mourn the loss of a king. I don't know that we can say much more if we're gonna break this into two pieces. We've set the stage for battle, right?
Right. I think you've done a marvelous job of that. And it's not, what I find so interesting is it's a battle of narrative, not just soldiers. Honestly, pound for pound on the battlefield, we already know that the hoplite is superior in a matchup against what the Persians are bringing to the forefront. Now, this time around, Xerxes is coming with something different. He's bringing his global, cosmopolitan army that is just whatever your people group, your subject people group is good at, dress up how you dress and bring the weapon you use. And we're going to make a statement that all of Earth is going against you and your homogenous army of hoplites. We are Earth, you are one people.
There's a group of warriors called the Immortals, and they're going to bring them to bear at a very specific battle that we should not say the name of right now.
Yeah, it's pretty good, isn't it?
It really is, dude.
So
it's so good.
Even if it's a long time before we get back to this, and I'd be up for coming right back to it immediately. We'll figure that out later, I suppose. But even if it's a long time, what I love about this story are the big, colorful characters. I love the way it overlaps with stuff that I care a lot about that involves the Bible, both the Old Testament and the New Testament. This stuff we're talking about at Delphi, it's the spirit of Python is what informs these prophets. Well, the spirit of Python comes into play in the book of Acts when Paul goes to one of the cities right up by Delphi. And there's a young girl there, much like these Delphi oracles, who can give prophecies. And according to the story in Acts, the demon, the spirit gets cast out of her, and her slave owner is irate because now she can't prophesy anymore because she lost the spirit of the Python, defeated by Apollo all the way back in the day when he was at Delphi. I mean, it all fits together and adds such depth and color to so many stories that matter so much artistically, narratively, religiously, politically, legally to our shared story that we have. And so it's not just looking back in time and picking one little interesting nugget and being like, oh, look, they're all interesting people. That's great. But the implications for this just spider web into the lives of literally every single person in the third chair right now. There is stuff from this story that dramatically affects your life even to this day, and to see it portrayed by these ancient sources in such a dramatic fashion, it's like they knew the stakes. They knew this was a fault line through all of human history and heritage, and they knew it deserved epic storytelling. And I'm really happy that that epic storytelling caught your attention and kept you in.
Absolutely. And there's, golly, I want to keep going, but we got to stop. It's time to put kids in bed. But, dude, it's amazing. Probably one of the most interesting things to me, obviously, is the battle that we're about to describe in the next episode. Can we just do it the next episode? Can we just do that?
I'd love it. Let's do it. We've never done a two-parter back-to-back before. Let's do something new. I'm in the mood. Okay,
let's do that.
Okay, but here are my terms.
Yeah.
We don't go prepare.
What do you mean?
Let's get right back on mics as soon as possible. And I don't want to cheat because then the two episodes will feel totally different. One, we're just having a conversation with whatever we remember is whatever we remember. And then the second one would be all Googled up.
You know, now that you say it, I was thinking about going stink hand on you, but I think I'm going to go Aristides the Just.